Covered a lot of different aspects of transportation. The last module addressed hazardous communications devices that we use. And there was a myriad of different communication devices, if you'll remember, all the way from proper shipping name to other communication devices from the hazardous material table, such as the UN number. Shipping papers was another communication device. And we looked at each one of those as far as what the regulations requires and the information that's got to go on. We're going to take this another step, and the next category we're going to look at, up to this point we've touched on just barely the marking and labeling that goes on packages. And that's what we're going to talk about now. It's taking care of the package as far as ensuring that it's got the right information on it, and also the conveyance. And that's where placarding comes in. We'll talk about the proper marking as far as placarding for the conveyance. That's where we're going to focus initially, and then we'll move into, as I said earlier, the final section, which has to do with emergencies and training and some other miscellaneous things. So starting with marking, here's some basic requirements as far as marking radioactive packages. This is the section in 49 CFR that talks about it. And in the first section there, 172, 301, and 302, that's generic to all hazardous material. The specifics for Class 7, which is radioactive material, is in 172, 310. And those links there will take you straight to the reg, so you can look at that later. But basically, this is marking for non-bulk hazardous material packaging. Non-bulk. Proper shipping name. That is a basic marking requirement for any radioactive material package. As far as that goes, it's for any hazardous material package. The UN ID number. If you'll recall, I showed you on the hazardous material table the various radioactive material proper shipping names, and right beside it was the UN number, a unique number for that particular type of radioactive package. And you'll see that it is required on all packages, including the accepted ones and the empty ones. You also have to have the name and the address of the consignor, consignee or consignor. And then if it is a hazardous substance, which radioactive material qualifies as a hazardous substance, you have to have an RQ on the package. And then, if there's a special permit required by DOT for that package, then you have to have that DOT SP number, special permit number, has to be on the package. All markings that you put on a package have to be durable. They have to be in English. And it has to be displayed in a manner so as not to be obscured or to reduce the effectiveness. An example of where it may be obscured, if you put it on the top or the bottom of the package, you set another box on it, it's obscured. So that kind of limits that, so you're left with the four sides of it, and either the end or the side, it doesn't matter, as long as it won't be blocked by something. And that's why you also usually put these on two sides opposite from each other, so that if one does get blocked, the other one's available. They have to be printed on the surface of the package, but they can also be on a label, a tag, or on a sign. I thought I had something in here maybe later. It's got to be durable. Can't be can't wash out if it gets wet or something like that. Shouldn't fade under normal exposure to sunlight. As far as if it's a liquid, if it contains liquid, the package with the internal inner packaging containing the hazardous must be marked with arrows on two opposite sides to indicate the upward position. In other words, which way's up. And it's got to be marked like that so that the package will remain upright. And that's based on the inside packaging. Can't use arrows for other purposes. If there's an arrow on a package, it's got to be used for this purpose to indicate up for the liquid contents. Now, there are some exceptions to that. We're not going to get into it, but for example, one of the exceptions for Class 7 there, for non-bulk, if the inner packaging is hermetically sealed, in other words, it's welded shut, there's no way it's going to leak, then you don't have to have those arrows. But those are all specified in the applicable section of 10 CFR or 49 CFR. There's an example of the label. Just it would have the arrows, and when you fix it, it would obviously have to go in the direction that would indicate up for the internal contents. Questions on liquids? Pretty straightforward. As far as marking for radioactive material, in addition to the basic marking requirements we just talked about,
The arrows that you discussed a moment ago, is there any particular size, minimum size that the display has to be?
You know, I don't think that the regs required. I don't recall reading that there was a minimum size on the label. They're pretty much standard labels that you buy. And if there are any size specs, I would imagine that the manufacturer would ensure that happens. You can check one of the links there, but I don't recall seeing the size on it. On some of these, there are, and that's why I'm saying I don't recall seeing anything on these. Good question. Any other questions on liquids? Marking for radioactive material. In addition to the markings we just talked about, the basic ones, the proper shipping name, unit number, things like that, we have these additional requirements for radioactive material. If it weighs more than 50 kilograms, that's 110 pounds, then you have to mark the weight on the package. You have to mark the type of packaging or package that it is. If it's a type IP1, 2, or 3, a type A, type B, VU, or type BM, whatever, the type of packaging that it is. If it's an IP1, 2, or 3, or a type A, there is also a country code that would be required to be placed on it. If it's originating in the United States, obviously that would be the United States, USA. If it is a type A package, a DOT 7A type A package, then you have to state that. And the name of the packaging manufacturer or the person that's done the testing. If you'll recall when we talked about type A and the testing that has to occur for it, we said that each individual shipper can do their own testing, and if they are the ones that does the testing, then their name would be what goes on here. If it's a type B package, if you'll recall, type B packages are the more sophisticated packages that they have to have a certificate of compliance, a certificate of certification by the NRC. So these are specialty packages, but if it is a type B, the trefoil radiation symbol that's attached to it has to be able to withstand the effects of fire and water. It's usually done by embossing or stamping on the metal plate or in the material itself, on the package itself. But basically, it just can't be a sticky label. Something that's going to, water might cause it to fall off, or fire will destroy it. And then also, if it's type B, and also for fissile material packages, you have to have the certification ID number, the pedigree, unique identifier for it. And you see an example of one there, USA/911-9166/BU-85. That's the certification number for that type B package. If you're doing exclusive use for LSA or SCO, then you don't have to have all of the markings, but you do have to have radioactive LSA or radioactive SCO stenciled or marked on it, as would be appropriate for the two. And the accepted packages are accepted from other markings except for the UN number. You'll recall when we looked at the accepted packaging, that really is the only thing that went on the package was the UN number. That was the picture of the box with the fire detectors or smoke detectors sitting off to the side that just said simply smoke detectors, and then it had a UN number. That's the only marking that's required for those types of packages. And here is an example of what Richard was asking about. Are there any size specifications? Yes. For the tray foil, there is a very specific size specification, including the angle between the blades, the comparative distance, measurements here, minimum dimensions. Those are all specified by the regulations. And again, usually you don't have a problem when you place an order for these labels to affix to your boxes. You'll order from a qualified vendor that attests to the fact that his product meets the regulatory requirements, blah, 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 blah. And so you can usually purchase without it, much fear of getting something that's not in accordance with regulations. And the reason I say usually, I know one time we got some that were, I forget what the exact problem is. It's either the tray foils, I think, went down this way too far, so that the propellers were much bigger than what was shown there. And we wound up in a NRC finding off of it because they were not in accordance with the regulations. Now, if you're talking about bulk radioactive material, remember bulk radioactive material would be something like a tanker car or an IT package that just had loose dirt in it. Normally, the DOT has looked at Type A and Type B packaging as non-bulk. So if it's Type A or Type B, that doesn't fall into the category of bulk packaging. But if it is bulk packaging, it usually will involve something like a tightly closed van or truck, rail car possibly, containing contaminated soil or debris, large bins or freight containers for solid materials such as that. Might be tanks or tank cars containing sludge or other liquid waste. And the way that's handled as far as marking is handled by the unique shipping name and the UN hazard number. You'll find if you go through the listing of the hazardous material table under radioactive materials, there is a classification for bulk radioactive material. And with that is that unique ID number. And you'll see here that the ID number is placed on either an orange rectangular panel adjacent to the required radioactive placard or on a plain white square on point display configuration have the same outside dimensions as the placard. I'm not I'm not real worried about you hearing about that, other than know that there's a unique marking for bulk containers. And that unique marking will be dictated by what it is. And that's all specified in the hazardous material table. And that's just another note that you can't put the ID number on the radioactive placard instead of the word radioactive for domestic. That's probably there because somebody did that once in a long time. That's marking. So to summarize that, wait back. To summarize that, you can look at it this way. The blue over here on this, that is basically the marking. This being the package. Package meaning that there is radioactive material content within it. It includes the packaging and the material, remember? The term package includes all of it. You'd have the proper shipping name, the UN number, the address, name and address of the consignor, consignee, which in this case ATC wouldn't be enough. You'd have to have the full address of the ATC. It's a hazardous material, so you'd have the RQ. This tells me there is liquid in there, and this is the up direction for my package. It's more than the weight limit, 115 pounds. The weight limit is, I believe it's 110. And so I've got to record the weight on here, 115 pounds. It is a Type A package, so I've got to have the words USA DOT 7A, and it really should also say here Type A beside it. So when you're writing that down, you might want to put Type A there with that. Who's it belong to? And then the US number associated with this Type A package. Those are markings. Those are markings. Package markings for radioactive material. Okay, now the next thing we're going to talk about is labeling. Different animal. And the regulations make a distinction between markings and labelings. What we just talked about is markings. What we're getting ready to talk about is labeling. For each package of Class 7 radioactive material, unless it's an accepted package, has to be labeled on two opposite sides with a distinctive warning label. Two opposite sides, distinctive warning label. And here's a note that accepted packages and domestic shipments of LSA and SCO that are conducted as exclusive use are accepted from the labeling requirements. Accepted packages and domestic shipments of LSA and SCO that are shipped as exclusive use are accepted from the labeling requirements. However, the ICAO says that even accepted packages require that it have a label on it that says radioactive materials accepted package. ICAO is the International Civil Aeronautics Organization. So if it's going anything airborne, you do have to put labeling on even accepted packages. And it has to say radioactive materials accepted package. This is what that ICAO label looks like. That would be the unique UN number from the hazardous material table for it. And it says, contains radioactive material accepted package, and it is in all respects in compliance with the applicable international and national government regulations. And Also makes a note here that this information does not appear on the notification to the captain. The captain doesn't necessarily know that he has accepted packages on board. Doesn't say it can't, it just says it doesn't have to. Now, other types of radioactive material packaging. It's based on the maximum package surface dose rate. Maximum package surface dose rate. So you have to get a contact reading on the package. And you have to determine the transportation index. Remember what the transportation index is? Who knows what that is? Members? Say it again?
Your milligram dose.
Okay, milligram per hour dose rate. At what distance?
1 meter.
Who said that? 1 meter, that's right. It's the MR per hour dose rate at 1 meter from the surface, but it's unitless. The TI is unitless, and so it's just, if you read 50 MR per hour at 1 meter, then the TI is 50.
So then based on both, do you go with the highest one?
So as far as assigning, yes. You always go with the highest. To determine the label, it's based on both the max surface dose rate and the transportation index, or the TI, the 1 meter dose rate in MR per hour. And the 3 labels that you choose from are these 3 right here. Radioactive white 1, radioactive yellow 2, or radioactive yellow 3. And these are in order of increasing dose rates. This radioactive white 1 would be the lesser. Radioactive yellow 3 would be the highest. And here's an example of the 3 labels. You see they're all triangular, or diamond shaped, I guess would be the right side symbol. The upper half all has the trefoil in it. This is the white one, so it would make sense it wouldn't have color up there. But then you have yellow 2 and yellow 3. You can also see a little difference here. Or common would be this 7. What do you suppose that is? It's a hazard class, right? Class 7. You'll see, I know it's difficult to read up here, but if you got it on your screen, it's contents and activity is available for all of them. But one difference is that block, and that's the transportation index. So you don't have to put a transportation index on the radioactive white 1. And if you'll notice, the number following radioactive is red, 1, 2, and 3, Roman numerals. Vertical bars is what they call it. Each label diamond shape. Here's again minimum size requirement, 3.9 inches on each side, or 100 millimeters. We've already talked about the white background and the yellow upper half. And here's a summary. This is fashioned after a table that's in 49 CFR. And really it's the label category based on transportation index and the package surface level. Remember I told you it's based on both of them. For the white 1, it basically is 0, transportation 0 or not applicable. Radiation level surface package is going to be less than or equal to 0.5 millirem per hour. And as far as the fissile criteria, you can see it here. And that would be a white 1. If you got a transportation index of 1 or less, you've got 0.5 millirem per hour, or radiation level greater than 0.5 but less than or equal to 50 millirem per hour. you've got yellow 2. And then where the transportation index is greater than 1 but less than or equal to 10, radiation levels, contact again, less than 50, or is greater than 50 milligram per hour but less than or equal to 200 milligram per hour, contact, is yellow 3. And you can see the little note here, the footnote C, if TI is greater than 10, then it'll be a yellow 3 and it must be ship exclusive use. There's another table that kind of looks at it, the same thing in a little different light, and basically just looks at it from the label standpoint. What's my limitation on surface dose rates and the 1 meter read, which is the TI. So either one of those illustrates it, shows you which label belongs with, or what dose rate limitations are placed on surface and 1 meter readings. As far as other information items that go on the label, it's got to be entered with legible printing. And of course, with today's printers, most of it can be done mechanically. Just feed a label sheet into a printer. Has a proper placard on it, and they can print out the information. Regardless of how you do it, it's got to be durable, weather resistant. It needs to contain the contents, and that's required except for LSA-1 material. And that includes the names of the radionuclides. If you've got several, all you've got to list, here it goes back to the application of that 95% rule. You only have to list the ones that comprise 95% of the total activity. In the case of this LSA-1 material, you can put LSA-1 in place of the name of the radionuclides. So contents is the first big thing that's got to go in there. The other thing, if you recall, when we looked at the labels, it had contents. The one thing right below it was activity. So that's the next thing. When you list the activity, it's got to be expressed in appropriate SI units. And I think we previously said you can put English units if you want to, but they go as far as in parentheses following the SI units. Except for plutonium-239 and plutonium-241, the weight in kilograms or grams or kilograms of the fissile radionuclides may be inserted instead of the activity units. So if you have fissile material other than plutonium-239 and 241, you can put the weight, the grams or kilograms, instead of activity. In the case of plutonium-241 and 239, you have to put both the weight in grams and the activity of the radionuclides. It's got to be both in that activity slot. The third bit of information is the transportation index. And that, as you saw on the labels, it only has a spot on the yellow 2 and yellow 3 labels. There's no need, and we don't place it on the white one. So to continue this, the labeling indicates the relative radiation hazard, if you will. whether it's a white 1, yellow 2, or yellow 3, it goes on two sides, opposite ends. Since we've got all this mess over here, we wouldn't do anything to block or obscure it. So that kind of leads us to the end panels for this particular one, where we would put a label here, we would also put a label on the other end. It would depend on whether it's white or yellow. Actually, for all three, we've got to have contents and activity. And then if it's a yellow 2 or yellow 3, additionally, we've got to put the TI, the Transportation Index. If this particular package had fissile material in it, we might have to do some restructuring because we've got to be able to present its label as well. And seriously, if this physical dimension is not big enough to put a bolt down here, then we would have to probably put it into a larger box. We would have to change the packaging. Because you cannot obscure one marking in favor of another one, or labeling or marking. So, as far as the fissile labeling, you can see it. It's white, black border. It's split in half like this with the word fissile up here. And then if you recall that criticality safety index that we talked about, that's got to go there. And you can also see it has a class 7. On these dotted lines, that's part of it too, by the way. That's part of the markings, or labeled. If it's an empty package, oh, sorry, there's some verbiage there. Got to be adjacent to the 2 radioactive material labels on the packaging, or on the package. And as I said earlier, if there's not room, then you have to make room by repackaging. As far as empty, if it's a radioactive material shipment that consists solely of an empty container, it's got to have, in addition to all the other required markings and labelings, it has to have an empty label affixed. If there are any other labels or marking that are on the package that are no longer applicable, they have to be removed or obliterated. In general, this tells you, just basically steps you through what the purpose of all the labeling is. And the intent is really to alert not only the people that may come into contact with it in an incidental state situation, but also for those that handle it. It's for their safety, it's for their alarm and exposure reduction. It's also to stipulate special handling that's required in any storage or separation, such as in the case of criticality safety index. Got to be stored 20 feet apart. I'm going to say 6 meters, depending on what the criticality safety index is. White 1 indicates that the hazard is low, no special storage handling required. Yellow 2 and yellow 3 indicate that it's an elevated external exposure hazard, and that there may be some storage and handling situations to be considered. If it bears the fissile, then, as I said, you've got to observe the separation criteria based on the CSI. And if it bears a yellow 3, then here comes and leads us into our placarding requirements. If it has a yellow 3 label on it, then it's got to be marked by the carrier with a placard. The conveyance, the vehicle, must be placarded. And that leads us into that. Any questions on labeling? Distinction from marking? Or any other requirements? Placarding is pretty straightforward. As we just said, the section that addresses it is here. If you have a radioactive yellow 3 package, then it must, the vehicle must be placarded. They're also required for domestic transportation of exclusive use shipments of LSA. So if you've got an LSA exclusive use shipment, then that shipment, that vehicle, must be placarded. If you're shipping surface contaminated objects in accepted packaging, if you're shipping liquid LSA-1 material or unpackaged LSA material or FCO, then the vehicle must be placarded. These are all requirements of when a vehicle must be placarded. And basically, what the regs say is that the shipper, in the case of a power plant, then that power plant rad waste department is responsible for providing appropriate placards, unless it's already placarded. And what you'll find is most cases that's what happens. The transporter, the carrier, he'll this is what they do. And so they typically will have placards attached to their vehicles in the proper locations. But it still is the shipper's responsibility to ensure they're proper. Even though it's on a semi-truck that they don't own, they're still required to ensure that it's proper. The shipper is to affix the placards to rail cars. If he's doing shipping by rail, then the person doing the shipping must attach the proper placards to the rail cars. Here are the requirements for placards. Everybody know what I mean when I say placard?
Metal duplicate attached to the side of
Say
a
again?
vehicle. Metal plaque attached to the side of a vehicle. Identifier.
Okay, that's correct. And in most cases, it's an installed thing that's on the vehicle, and it's split so that they can have different types of placards. And when it's not in use and no placard applies, then it may flip down to a standard safety message like drive safely or something like that. That's what a placard is. As far as the requirements for them, they must be securely affixed or placed in a holder, and that's what I was talking about, holder.
Sorry. My child was talking. She knows I'm in school.
Where was it?
I don't know.
Placards have to be securely attached on each side of the vehicle. On each side of the vehicle. Now, when I say each side, that does not include the top and the bottom. Okay, so on the trailer, you don't have to have placards on the top and bottom. What you need to understand is on a semi-trailer, the trailer may be unhooked from the tractor for a while, and so that trailer by itself must have all sides placarded. And so when a truck pulls up and hooks up to the trailer, then it must have one on the front. Okay, so that all sides are now still covered and apparent, visible. So keep that in mind. Some companies have gotten in trouble with that by not placarding the trailer when the trunk is hooked up to it. And the truck disconnects and drives off, and then you've got one side that's not placarded on the trailer. It's got to be clear of any apertures, and my goodness, what a word. Apparatuses and devices such as ladders, pipes, doors, trampolines, things like that, coverage that they put on some vehicles. It cannot be covered up by any of that. It's got to be so that dirt or water is not directed from the wheels of the transport vehicle. You've seen trucks in the wintertime, are rainy days, the spray from the wheels really can kick up on the trailer, and it's got to be clear of that spray. Got to be located away from any marking such as advertising that could reduce its effectiveness. And in any case, it's got to be at least 3 inches away from such marking. What they're worried about there is the camouflage effect. That some, like, you know, the truck or the transport's name might be in bright yellow, and you put a yellow placard on that bright yellow, that placard's not going to be visible, or at least not without looking for it. And so that's the intent of that one. They don't want it to be camouflaged by advertising or anything that might reduce its effectiveness. It's got to be maintained in a condition so that the legibility format and all that stuff is maintained regardless of normal transportation hazards. And it's got to be affixed to a contrasting background or color. Goes back to the camouflaging thing. As far as what it looks like, that's a placard. That's the normal one. Pretty simple in message. Trefoil yellow, radioactive, class 7. It does have size limitations. If it is a highway route controlled quantity being shipped on highways, then you got the normal placard, but it's bordered in black, and it's got this solid border around it. Any questions on placarding? Pretty straightforward. Okay? That moves us into emergency response. Emergency response information requirements. Prior to 9/11, there were regulations that addressed emergency response, but it was minimal. I mean, it was adequate, certainly, but with the regulation that we were targets to terrorists and other things can happen. Anybody here with that?
That wasn't me this time.
Oh, yeah. Let's see what we're doing. Maybe it's a message. She said it's yours? Oh.
I didn't know it was that low.
Emergency response. So it's been beefed up a little bit as a result of 9/11. Here's some general information. Here's the section that talks about it, but it does require shippers to provide emergency response information on all hazardous materials shipments. If it's required to have shipping paper, then it must have emergency response information on it. Since accepted packages do not require shipping papers, it says this about them. They're accepted from shipping, and therefore they're not subject to emergency response information unless they contain a hazardous substance. Radioactive material is considered a hazardous substance, so there would be emergency response information required. The information itself, minimum must provide basic description, technical name of the hazardous material, proper shipping name, and the shipping paper information that we talked about previously, all that stuff, that satisfies that requirement. Immediate hazards developed, immediate precautions to be taken in the event of an accident or an incident. This is first responder type stuff. And is available to the first responders so that they know. Anybody familiar with MSDS? Okay, most of you are. It is a listing of just that. Hazardous health, immediate precautions to be taken in the event of accident or incident or exposure. That's basically what this is MSDS type information. Immediately immediate methods for handling fires, and also for spills or leaks in the absence of a fire, as well as first aid to be taken. Those are the things that must be provided as far as emergency response. As I said, this information is going to be kept on a shipping paper or an associated document that's kept with the vehicle, maintained at all times as long as the shipment is in progress. And if you've ever taken any, let's see, you guys have had RPT 120. No, you're doing that next semester, right? Okay. You'll get into this, the Emergency Response Guidebook. This is a DOT guidebook that's really provided to all state troopers, law enforcement folks, as well as first responders. And it's a handy little book about that thick and about this big that has everything that you need to know to respond to emergency response, initial emergency response for a hazardous materials issue. But that information is very similar to what you find in the guide pages of that little book. And most shippers will satisfy the requirement by attaching a page or the excerpts from the emergency response guidebook to their shipping papers. That way they know they've got it covered. Shippers, people doing the shipping, the power plant, DOE, whoever's sending it out on the road, has to maintain an emergency response telephone number with 24/7 response. And it's got to be staffed by somebody who is familiar with that shipment and the material that's in that shipment, and be able to provide information to be able to mitigate any incidents and assist the emergency first responders. This is usually done by a third party. And if it is, then whoever is providing the shipping still has responsibility for it. They just have to ensure the agency has the most current information, that most of your processes will require you to notify that agency as soon as the shipment leaves your facility and starts in transit. You'll notify them with the...
Shoot. Turn this thing off. I know, I'm being disruptive, and it's off.
Technology is a wonderful thing.
I hate it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. As soon as you put it on the road, you'll let them know there's a unique number that you'll assign it as far as your shipping number. They'll get a copy of your manifest, your shipping paper, and also a copy of any emergency response information that you provided to the driver. So they have everything that you would have available to them in the event that there's an incident. We had a shipment, it's when we were still shipping radioactive waste up to the northwest. There was a burial site up there that was accepting Class A waste. And so we were regularly shipping. And it was in the wintertime, and the truck slid off an icy highway and tore the side of the semi-trailer open. You know, I mean, it's just flimsy metal. But tore it open. It didn't breach any of the packages, but that was just a really good example of as soon as it happened, that driver knew he was supposed to respond. He had the emergency response contact information on his shipping papers. He made the phone call. They immediately notified us, and within like 6 hours, we had somebody from our organization at the accident site. Which was probably far beyond what we needed to do, but that's the level of concern you have with these things. You take responsibility, it's still your shipment. And so our Radway supervisor was there within 6 hours. We had another case where we had, just to give you an idea of some emergency response stuff, we were shipping it was an old reactor coolant pump housing and rotor, okay? Fairly highly, contaminated, not much in dose rates. But we loaded it at the site, and it was on a closed transport vehicle, exclusive use. It was an LSA-2, I think. And we set it in the middle of this truck, okay, which you would think's a good thing. You want to distribute the weight, right? Well, he got about 40 miles down the road, and the truck did this, because it was very heavy. It was a pretty heavy load, but it just buckled, boom, like that. And I got to respond to that one. It was just 40 miles down the road. But, we had to get another truck there. We had to get our folks there with heavy lift equipment. We had to offload the contents, put it onto another shipping vehicle. We had to prepare shipping papers, whole 9 yards. Had to bring it back to the facility. But as far as the investigation, I did the root cause evaluation on it, and what we found out was that neither our loaders, our rad waste handlers, nor the guy receiving the shipment had any really training on load distribution, on how to properly balance your load in a semi-trailer or a trailer truck. And what turns out to have been what he should have done was, those rear wheels on a trailer truck are adjustable. They can be moved toward the cab or away from the cab. What he should have done was pull those all the way up to the front and set the load closer to that axle. And it wouldn't have, well, because what we did is we overloaded, we stressed that trailer, and it just broke on us. So that gives you some idea. Same thing happened there. He had stuff right here. He made his phone calls, contacts were made. We were there like that because it was only 40 miles down the road. And all the appropriate authorities were contacted. Nobody was hurt. Nobody was overdosed. No problems. But it is our responsibility, even though we may use a third-party vendor to take care of it for us, it's still our responsibility. So that's the emergency response information. Any questions on that? Yeah.
You say it's like a really long distance away. Is there a point where you would contact the receiving end for emergency instead of the actual shipping?
Well, you would be contacted. The shipper would have to be contacted anyway. Now, as far as who responds, yes. In fact, we responded and contacted the point to which we were shipping it. They dispatched support out to the site until we got there. So that they kind of took the initial command and control of the situation as far as radiological controls, ensured that there were no releases or anything like that, and I guess stood guard on it, took possession of it until we could get there.
Since the receiver hasn't officially taken ownership of that material, though, so you're the shipper, then the carrier's got it, there's an accident with the carrier, it's still the shipper's responsibility. The receiver, the person actually, if it's a different company or different plant, they really don't have any responsibility.
No, they have no responsibility.
Okay. But
They did that just as a cooperative spirit. And
yeah, I mean, it's
help us out till we could get there. No, it was still the shipper's responsibility. You still own it until they sign that piece of paper at the other end saying, we take it, it's ours. Good question. Any others? Okay, that's the emergency response. Training requirements. 49 CFR also talks about the training that's required. This right here, this little semester course that we have, satisfies the very basic radioactive materials handling course. Very basic. For you to be qualified to handle it at a facility, preparation for transportation, you've got to undergo quite a bit more training. And undoubtedly, some of you will wind up assigned in locations where you'll have to do that. But it's very specific, and it's laid out in 704 there. But it does say there that each hazmat employer must ensure that each hazmat employee receives required training and testing in the following subjects. General awareness, and this is where we would satisfy this. When you do RPT 120, you actually meet the OSHA requirements for a HAZWOPER worker. All right, so that is one of the detailed training requirements. That is under OSHA, but DOT recognizes it. You also have to receive training in function-specific training. The example I gave you there a while ago about none of our rad waste handlers had received any specific training on loading, proper loading requirements. That's function-specific training. And it turns out we had not ever had a problem. Didn't know it, didn't think about it. Safety training, obviously, should be part of it. And security awareness. This is one of those things that was added after 9/11, security awareness. And then in-depth security training if a security plan is required. And there are specific times when a security plan is required. We'll get that here in a second. The initial training that required that an employee receives has got to be done within 90 days of being assigned to a specific job in the rad waste or radioactive materials handling program. Must have retraining. Okay, so it's not a one-time shot, it's retraining. Every 3 years or within 90 days after assignment to a new job for which you've not already received training. So there's initial training required within 90 days, then there's retraining every 3 years or within 90 days if you get a new job assignment. There are a whole lot more details on the training. If you're interested, you can go to that particular link. But now we need to talk about security requirements. These are the things that were added after 9/11. These are the sections that talk about it. Tells you when and how to develop a security plan and who has what responsibility. They're required for those who offer transportation the following types and quantities of any hazardous material. Hazardous material in an amount that must be placarded. So if you're going to put a placard on it, then you have to have a security plan. That's almost all of our radioactive material that we were talking about. Yellow 3 and then the LSAs and SCOs. So we really have to have some level of security plan. They're required for those who offer transportation in the following types and quantities. I'm not going to get in, you don't have to worry about the specifics, it just gives us some idea of what they get to look at. Hazardous material in bulk packaging, and it gives a limitation on the liters or gallons. For gases, what the cubic feet requirements are. If it's an agent or toxin regulated by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there are requirements for that. OSHA safety training may be used to satisfy this requirement. Here are some things that the minimum things that a security plan has to follow. One, it has to talk about personnel security. And that basically has to do with background checks that are performed on employees, job applicants that are hired that involve access to or handling of the hazardous material that might be covered by that security plan. Unauthorized access. There's got to be measures taken to address the possibility of unauthorized personnel may gain access to it either while you're preparing it for transportation or while it's in transport. And then also en route security. What are you going to do while it's being transported to address the security risk? And the level of detail that goes into the security plan obviously would be dictated by the level of hazard or the level of threat associated with a particular shipment. And again, there's a whole lot more detail to it. Just wanted to give you a sampling and some idea of when a security plan is required and what that security plan needs to address. Any questions on security plan? This next section is QA/QC, quality assurance, quality control. And this has to do really with, for the most part, has to do with the Type B packaging that we've been discussing. The DOT section 474 does talk about it, talks about the construction of the quality packaging, and then quality control requirements prior to shipment of Class 7 radioactive materials. Basically what, and then also 10 CFR 71. 10 CFR 71, if you'll recall, was the regulation that dictated and directed the certification of the Type B packaging. Basically, these two regulations combined stipulate the quality assurance requirements for the construction and the use of the packaging. And again, it's Type B and above packaging that typically would be involved. One has to do with prior to the first use of the packaging. In other words, it's newly manufactured. Here it is. You remember those tests that we talked about that it's got to go undergo. It gets a certification off of that. Well, all of that gets fed through the quality assurance organization for the facility that's purchased it or is going to use it. And their role there is to, prior to first use, make sure that these requirements are met, that it meets the quality of the design and construction requirements specified in the hazardous material regulations, and that if there's shielding configurations associated with it or containments, such as making it airtight or watertight or pressure tight, any of those types of requirements are satisfied. Heat transfer characteristics of the package. Possibly it's a device that provides cooling for specific hazardous material. Then that heat removal capacity or capability has got to be assured as well. And it all boils down to the package design. So it's an oversight role. Prior to the first use of the packaging, it's got to go through this quality assurance, quality control mandate, if you will. And then, prior to each shipment, the person offering the material for shipment has to satisfy these things, either by examination or test. That is proper for the contents to be shipped. There are some check or balance in the process for radioactive material shipments when you go through and select the packaging that's going to be used for the material that's going to be shipped. There's somebody that oversees that does a quality assurance check or a quality control check on that selection. And usually it's procedurally driven, and usually it does involve a third party, if you will, someone from the quality assurance or quality control organization at the facility. Comes in and does the oversight. It also ensures that it's unimpaired physical condition except for superficial marks. These Type B packaging especially are really inspected under a magnifying glass, if you will. There are certain non-destructive testing that's got to be done on it on a periodic basis, like high penetrant test of some critical welds, checking bolt length on bolts that are torqued, such as closure devices, things of that nature, must be checked. The closure devices on the packaging, including any required gaskets, have to be properly installed, secured, free of defects. Those are some of the things that they look at prior to shipment. For fissile material, if there's a moderator built in, a neutron absorber is present, if it's required, is checked to make sure that it's present and it's in the proper configuration and also condition. Special instruction for filling, closing, and preparation of packaging for shipment has been followed. Again, that's usually provided by an oversight from a quality control organization, a quality control inspector, somebody is not part of the RAD waste organization, for example. If it's got closure devices or valves, anything like that, containment systems, all that has to be inspected. If it's containing excess liquid or liquid in excess of A2 quantity, and it's going to air shipment, it's got to be tested to show that it won't leak. They need to see the internal pressure requirements of a pressurized containment system. It's got to be checked. A lot of things that go into it is really where we're headed with this. You can't just use it. It's got to be inspected. And then, of course, the RP side of it is the radiation contamination levels are within the lab for the particular package or packaging that's going on. Any questions on QA/QC? Okay. Moving along, there are some miscellaneous things we're going to talk about. And these are 10 CFR related to transportation. We've already discussed some of these, so some of it's not new to you. And we just talked about this, that if we're using that Type B package, it has the certification, and our quality organization must ensure that it's approved by 10 CFR 71, and that the certification requirements have been met, and that we have certificate of compliance for it. You already know this, 10 CFR 71 addresses the NRC licensed radioactive material shipping requirements. And this just is a statement telling you that by meeting those, you will meet the agreement state requirements. And also, there are some transport-related requirements in 10 CFR Part 20. I don't know that we've actually addressed these. There's an appendix in 10 CFR 20, Appendix G, that talks about transfer of low-level waste to a burial site for disposal. And what it does in Appendix G is it says that this waste generator, collector, or processor who transports whoever's shipping it out to a low-level waste facility for ultimate disposal must prepare a manifest. And here's what it calls it. It calls it a manifest, and it tells you this form. It's a Form 540, which is called the Uniform Low-Level Radioactive Waste Manifest. That is nothing more than the shipping papers that we've already talked about. What it is it's isolated specifically to radioactive waste. It is a pre-published form that the NRC has. And if you click and go to this, I just want to show it to you real quick, because it's a great review for what's required on shipping papers. So you can use it for that purpose. And I understand you can't see everything, but this is the form, and oops, I can't use this one. These are it's kind of a template, and you can go online and actually fill it out online and then print. But what you'll see here, and unfortunately, like I said, you can't really read it. Emergency contact information, all required to be on shipping paper. The shipper, name and facility. This is the name and the address that would go on the packages. Who the carrier is, who's taking the shipment for you. Gives you the signature by that carrier, and that basically says he accepts that load. You can see here, this is a listing, this is the manifest itself, And if you get to reading down here, it gives the U.S. Department of Transportation description. This is the proper shipping name that we're talking about. And tells you which DOT label that you put on it. All right, so whether it's white 1, yellow 2, or yellow 3, you record that here. What's the transportation index? The physical chemical form. Individual radionuclides. All right, here's where the 95% rule still applies here. Total packaging activity. I can't make that one out. What is it?
It's LSA and SEO class.
Okay, LSA SEO class. Then the total weight or volume, the classification number of the package. So you can see all the information we talked about previously, it goes on this thing. So it's a good review, it's a good template to use as far as what's needed for shipping papers. And it does satisfy the DOT shipping paper requirements. So by filling that out for Radway shipments that are being shipped under 10 CFR 20 Appendix G, you satisfy the 49 CFR requirements for shipping papers. Any questions on the NRC related stuff? 10 CFR 71 is the main one. 10 CFR 20 Appendix G is the one that talks about the manifest. And then the other category. This will finish us up. Notifications. In 10 CFR 71, it requires that the licensees that are shipping highway route control quantities of nuclear waste that are in Type B packages or spent fuel or special nuclear materials. If you're shipping anything that in its classifications, then you have to provide advance notice to the state governors or their designated representative. And these are the state governors of the states in which your shipment is going to pass. And it's usually required to, it usually has a time requirement on it. I'll try to look at the time requirement. I think it's within 12 hours of the transport vehicle actually entering their state. If, as part of the NRC's efforts as far as September 11th reaction, the additional requirements that are required as a result of that for people that are shipping NRC license activity equipment or material. They include advance notification to the NRC. So now, in addition to the state governors, we have to notify the NRC about certain radioactive material shipments. This goes toward the security aspect of it. As far as the carrier, here's some principal things that apply to everybody that carries hazardous material. They have to ensure that the vehicle is properly placarded, that the shipper has properly certified the shipment. That's where that driver's signature on that manifest goes. He says that I accept this load, and then it has been properly certified by the shipper. In other words, I know what it is, and I know what I've got. He is also responsible for maintaining radiation control based on the package EIs, and also separation criteria based on other things such as the CSI. And that carrier is responsible for reporting any incidents involving fire, accident, breakage, or suspected radioactive material contamination. That carrier is also responsible for providing training to their hazmat employees. As a driver of an exclusive use vehicle, the driver has specific training that he has to have received. He's got to receive that initially within 90 days of being assigned that job, and then retraining every 3 years. Unless he's assigned something new, then it's 90 days ago. The carrier, not necessarily the driver, but the carrier has to develop security plans associated with their role and must register with the DOT and submit some annual fee to carry basically their share of the cost with implementing the increased security requirements. Any questions on the other, basically the carrier requirements?
The carriers, do they actually, or the, let's put it to you this way, the driver, when he is actually rolling on the road, are there certain rules that say that he has to check, you know, his load to see, or are there particular stops where he has somebody check the load to see if it still meets what it started out originally, whatever dose, to monitor dose runs. Is he equipped with that, with the equipment to do that, or does he stop periodically and have it checked?
Okay. Those were all excellent questions.
It's a bunch,
Let me see if I can get them all.
Okay.
No, they were. First one had to do with, does he have to inspect his load? He inspects the load as it's being loaded.
Okay.
He inspects the load after they button everything up and before he signs that paper. He inspects to make sure that he's set. And what he's doing is he's checking his manifest to make sure everything that's supposed to be on there is on there.
Right.
Because that's his baby right there.
Right.
That tells him what he needs to know about that load. And he's also checking his alacrity and other things associated with his manifest. Once he's satisfied, he signs it off, gives a copy to the shipper. Okay. Now, from that point on, that load basically belongs to him. It's his responsibility. There are no prescribed intervals by which he's got to stop and check.
Right.
Okay. In other words, he doesn't have to stop every 4 hours or 8 hours or whatever. He does have restrictions based on the dose rates that are on there on where he can go. If he's carrying an exclusive use shipment that has the maximum dose rates on it, he's not going to pull into an all-night truck stop and park, beside some other sleepers. He's got a separation requirement that he's got to maintain based on the hazard. He is not equipped, and neither is he expected to do any type of monitoring himself. And that's not to say, I'm sorry, that's not to say that his company may not say, okay, look, we're giving you this alarming dosimeter, and it may have a monitoring capability like some of them do. You've got restrictions as far as the dose rates that can be read on this, don't exceed so-and-so milligram per hour. He'll receive specific training from the carrier. But as far as the shipper is concerned, the expectation is not that he would do any type of monitoring. And DOT doesn't require it. What's your question?
Something with the normal weight scales like any other?
Oh, yeah. The standard DOT type stuff where you got to pull into the scales when you enter into a new state. Yeah. He's got to maintain his logs just like normal. And all the other transport requirements normally required of a cross-road driver. Good questions. Did I get all of them?
I think you did.
Okay.
At the truck stops now, like you get these shipments over water, they come in and these guys are equipped with all the monitoring equipment and all that. Are the truck stops also in the same situation where they're equipped with some monitoring equipment?
I would be very surprised if any of the normal truck stops have anything
Yeah.
like that.
I would be too, but it
But
just
the
seems...
weight scales do. I think I've mentioned several times the one going over to Georgia.
Right.
There's a monitor there.
Yeah.
And every truck coming off that highway goes through that weight scale, goes through those monitors. So they know they've got radioactive material.
For that quality control on the gas, that representative of the company, we were shipping some thermal shielding. And they had the load to put on the truck, so he looked at the tires to see how low they were getting. He looked at the treads and says, take it off, you gotta change those tires before you can take this truck out of here.
Great.
So maybe great if we go as far as inspect the truck, make sure it's up to it.
Yeah, goes back to the quick QA checklist I was talking about. A lot of times what there will be is a shipment checklist in conjunction with that. And there are normal, and I think it's a DOT requirement, normal minimum thread requirements. And a lot of places, before they'll let them take their shipment, they'll measure that thread. And if it's, like you said, if it doesn't meet the transportation requirements, it doesn't go on the road. Because it's still your material. They're just doing you a service by transporting it for you. Good questions, good point, thanks. Anybody else? Okay, everything else in this lesson plan you have seen before. So I'm not going to cover it again. It's there for your review. We talked about it when we talked about handling and control. And it has to do with receipt and opening radioactive material packages. The time requirements that are associated with it, the dose rates and contamination levels that are associated with it, all of that, if you recall. And if you don't, here it is for your review. And with that, that is the end of the transportation module.